idea was that. The free road, the roadmap for peace. And wasn't that the name of Bechdel's Aqaba pipeline project, which Donald Rumsfeld spent 2 weeks in 1988, and President Saddam Hussein's palaces negotiating, and because the Iraqis said no, their killing of Kurds is bad. Turks, who spent the 90s killing 30,000 Kurds, wiping out 3,500 Kurdish villages, do allow BP to build the Baku-Jahan pipeline. That's good killing of Kurds. Baku-Jahan pipeline, so much of our public money going into this. Taking oil and gas from Azerbaijan to Shahan in Turkey, Transparency International has listed Azerbaijan as the world's third most corrupt regime, although there's some speculation that Azerbaijan may have fiddled the result by slipping a bun to Colombia to swap second place. So we're never going to know. So I intend tonight's show to be a voyage back to the past, to retell the stories of some of the people who've seen things differently all through history. Now, of course, I know these 24-hour rollover news and huge Hollywood films and documentaries made by the Academy of Arts and the Office of Global Communication will reach millions. My little show, a couple of hundred of you in Brighton on a Tuesday night, but I'm hopeful. So I believe there's a special property about us all being in the same actual physical space together, which means that I can utterly brainwash you. And 6 weeks from now, you're just sitting down having your breakfast, and for no reason at all, I must go and blockade the M23 now. Oh, by the way, you know that Moscow theatre siege? I was wondering how long the audience took to realise it wasn't all part of the show. Sitting there going, it's marvellous the way this production's brought in the parallels with the modern Chechnya situation. It's very good. That chap's very convincing, isn't he? And when they came in and they fired the machine guns up at the ceiling and all the plaster came down, and an allusion to the snowfall in Dr. Zhivago, I thought, marvellous effect. I don't know how that. Why do people hate us? Because we haven't told the American story. It couldn't be anything to do with anything anybody might have actually done. I have here a copy of an official State Department list called Instances of the Use of the United States Armed Forces Abroad, 1798 to 1945. It is in itself an instance of another attempt to retell the American story, because it was compiled in 1962 by Kennedy's Secretary of State, Dean Rusk, to show before a reluctant Congress who didn't want to invade Cuba because they thought it was un-American. He wanted to show it to them and cite precedents for the invasion of Cuba to say to them, no, it's really American. It couldn't be more American. Here's a short bit from a long list. 1853 to 54, Japan. The opening of Japan is the official State Department reason. 1854, Nicaragua. San Juan del Norte was destroyed to avenge an insult to the American minister to Nicaragua. We go China, Angola, Hawaii, Nicaragua. Of course, since 1945, the US has bombed 21 different countries, been involved in military action overseas every single year. In fact, discounting the years of the American Civil War, 1861 to 65, in the entire list, from 1798 to the present hour, there is only 1 year, 1892, when the United States does not invade another country. What went wrong? I became curious about what could possibly have been happening in 1892 that made the entire United States suddenly gay. So I've done some research into it because I thought it might be useful for us to know what with one thing and another. Your guess is as good as mine on any of these, but these are some of the things which were happening in the United States in 1890. January the 12th, the first newspaper cartoon strip, Professor Tiggy Whistle's Burglar Alarm, appeared in the New York Daily Graphics newspaper. How funny was this? This might have been a really funny cartoon. There's President Polk in the Oval Office with his generals discussing the invasion of Mexico, saying, OK, gentlemen, if we turn to page 3 of today's Daily Graphics, we can read some incendiary remarks made only yesterday by Generals Zapata and... Oh, look. Professor Tiggy Whistle. He's fixed a saucepan up above the door, but a twat up and just come and send him on the fucking hell. Meeting in charge will kill small brown people next year. That's so funny. January the 15th. the rules of basketball were published for the first time in Springfield, Massachusetts, where the game originated. January the 18th, Oliver Hardy was born. Yes, that would have been a difficult labour. Would it, however, have required every able-bodied man in the United States? March 15th, New York State unveiled the new automatic ballot voting machine. Hark, we may hear the wings of destiny beating over it. I feel we get closer here. We get closer here. May the 19th, the first fig rolls were created. Fig rolls. And then you see, of course, July 1892, the Homestead, Pennsylvania steelworkers strike, very famous strike in US labour history. Gun battles between the strikers and the Pinkerton detectives. The militia were called out, more shooting, leads to general strikes in New Orleans and in the silver mines in Idaho. That year, 1892, no war but the class war. And the list is very instructive in a number of other ways. I mean, because it's been filled, I better say that there are a couple of other years apart from 1892, but that aren't on this. But you investigate them and they're grey areas, like 1875, it's not listed, but you search it and you think, what was happening in 1875 was the Second Sioux War. And what was that about? They wouldn't sell the lands, sell the federal government lands north of the River Platte. So I would say that was an instance abroad in the, whatever. I know that could have been done by a footnote running along the bottom of the screen. But then if any of you, you say, hey, he didn't fucking say that, you know. The list is instructive in a number of ways. Firstly, what a tribute to the propaganda system that all our invasions can be presented as one-offs. Unique, exceptional circumstances. We're a peace-loving nation. We don't like to go to war, but on this special, exceptional occasion, I guess we're going to have to. Same with Britain. We know what is British soldiers in Afghanistan now, from last year. And all right, this time, okay, yes. All right. It was a noble and humanitarian mission. Nothing to do with UNICAL being unable to build a pipeline across northern Afghanistan because the Taliban couldn't achieve hegemony over the Mujahideen and Chevron were losing $10 billion a day, but everything to do with a war of feminist liberation so that the women of Afghanistan could share in the same sexual emancipation enjoyed by their sisters in our allied state, Saudi Arabia. Okay, that is clear in my mind. But if that is the case, I put it to you therefore, how come? Therefore, the very first words that Dr. John Watson ever hears issue from the lips of Mr. Sherlock Holmes when they first meet in a study in Scarlet are, how are you? Here is a gentleman of a medical type with the air of a military man, clearly an army doctor then. He has just come from the tropics, for his face is dark, and that is not the natural tint of his skin, for his wrists are fair. He has undergone hardship and sickness, as his haggard face says. Clearly, his left arm has been injured. He holds it in a stiff and unnatural manner. Where? In the tropics, because an English army doctor has seen much hardship and got his arm wounded in Afghanistan, of course. There remaining but one question: did you bring me back some skag? There remains, of course, one other question. What on earth were the Royal Berkshire Fusiliers doing in northwest Kandahar for Dr. John Watson's subclavian artery to be pierced by the ball of a Jersey musket in the first place? Well, we know the answer. Empire. Colonialism. But what is empire? How do you do a colony? And writing at the time of the First World War, the most famous British historian of the day wrote, for all its faults, the British Empire was a genuine idealistic component, and I wasn't going to say it, but Curzon in Viceroy of India in 1899 was saying, to me, I confess, the countries of the world are no more than pieces on a giant chessboard on which is being played out a great game for world domination. And the strange thing is there's a lot of retelling of the British story going on at the minute. You know, we're hearing, for the first time in a long while, people apologising for the British Empire. Not apologising in the sense of saying sorry, but being apologists, saying it was a benevolent and altruistic institution. We haven't heard those arguments in public since the last time people had to pay to go to university. And we're hearing them again. A few weeks ago on one of those Radio 4 book programmes, there was an interview with a young historian who'd written a book called The Indian Mutiny. And he was saying, well, you know, it's very easy to criticise the British Raj are, you know, strapping sepoys to cannons and blowing them up. But actually, and I swear to God, I'm now quoting him as word for word as I can remember, he said, but actually, yeah, if you were to go back in time,